Hi everyone, I'm Sayanti, the artist behind Sayanti Fine Arts. Since July, I have been working on a monthly painting series representing the Zodiac theme of each month. This month it is a time for the Pisces painting. If you have not checked out the other paintings I've done of this series since July, I'll have a card popped up showing the playlist, and I'll also link them in the video description below. So do check them out, and without much ado, let's get started with this painting. After I did my initial drawing, I first marked off the Pisces constellation with a white oil pastel. What it does is it creates a resist just like masking fluid would on the surface. So when I'm putting water and adding paint, this area will remain white and will not be stained with any color. So if you are not wanting to use masking fluid, this is a very neat technique that you can use instead. Then I'm putting a lot of cerulean blue in the background. I'll be using all different shades of blue: cerulean, ultramarine, cobalt blue, Prussian blue, and all the blues that I had in my watercolor set. I'm using a Holbein watercolor set and working on a Strathmore cold press watercolor paper, which all of that and all the other materials that I have used is linked in the video description below, so you can check that out if you have any questions regarding the materials that I've used. So what I'm trying to create here in the watercolor layer is a background which is similar to an underwater scene, and I want a circular pattern here where the constellation area is kind of like the light source, and the further away you're going from that light source area, the darker is the striations in water. And as of now, you can see I'm working wet on wet, so that whatever the markings that I'm putting on the wet surface, it's most of it is getting blended, which is the intended purpose, but it is leaving some of the marks as well, and that is also intended because I want some striations, but I want some of them to be blended as well to get a natural underwater look. At this point, I'm using some purples too to get the darker areas, and for the corners I'm using a lot of Prussian blue. And when I will go over with oil pastels, I will use all the different blues that I have in my Holbein 40-piece set. And since I'm going to go over the entire area, entire painting, everything with oil pastels, so I don't need to be very careful when I'm doing this watercolor layers. It's just a mapping for me to think about the colors, where I want to put what colors, and create a guided map, so that when I am working with oil pastels, it's just like working on a coloring book where it is already telling you where what colors would work out, and you just fill in kind of those colors and getting it brighter. I like to mix oil pastels and watercolors in this way because it creates a very nice bright painting, and it brings best of both mediums together. With watercolors, I'm very easily able to create a background and cover the white of the paper very easily in no time at all. And with oil pastels, I'm able to brighten the colors and make it very bold and beautiful. So onto the body, I'm also going and just creating a value map. And next, I'm moving on to my oil pastels. As you see, I am starting with the blue shade and just filling in the entire area. And you can see that I'm being very not so careful about blocking in, not putting in a lot of pigment at this area, because I am going to come back and use whites, grays, a lot of other shades of blue, and put pigment on top of pigment on top of pigment to get to the right color combination I want. And then I am going back and using my clay shaper tool as a blending tool in this case. Of late, I've been using this tool at the maximum for blending. I think it's kind of magical how this thing works. You can use tortillons as well, but in my opinion, this works a tiny bit better than those. It's much easier to push those pigments down and judge how much more pigment you need to put in which area, and then have a very smooth blended look. Onto the constellations, and onto the area where the stars are put, I'm first placing a little bit of yellow and then white on top of it. Then I'm going back to another blending tool, the same clay shapers, and blending it all off, and then creating striations with my white to join those things and make the constellations bright. Back to the blue of the water, adding more and more pigments. Half of the painting is about, adding more and more different shades of blue, greenish blue, and purples, and even a little bit of black at the very edges. But the only thing I have focused here is to get that swirly circular look, so I kind of created a circular pattern in the center and went outwards and made the circle bigger and bigger as I went outwards. What colors I put on top of it doesn't necessarily need to be the exact same colors. It's just the look of water. Underwater scenes have a lot of blues, purples, greens, and it just depends. And this is more like a surreal painting, so I don't have to be 100% realistic on the water. I let my imagination rule a lot in this painting as far as the watercolor is concerned. And I also let a lot of the striations to be bold and not blend everything in and smooth it all out, because I thought that looked very pretty, the marks, some of the marks being bold and not blended out. But it's obviously a personal choice how much blending you want to do and how much streaky you want to keep your painting. If you're going from the impressionistic look, you might want to create just bold streaks, and I think that would look very pretty, kind of very reminiscent of the Van Gogh's The Night Sky painting, the famous one, of course. And I think that look would look beautiful in this kind of a painting as well. But I wanted to be kind of semi-realistic, just stick to surrealism and realism more than impressionism, because I'm not that well versed with impressionism, although I love it a lot. Still putting on more and more pigments. With oil pastels is something that's inevitable. It takes a while to put on enough amount of pigments, and for me it's very difficult to judge in the very beginning how much pigment I really need to put to create that smooth look. So I just put one layer, blend it all out with whatever blending tools I'm using, and then if that is not enough, then I go with another layer and slowly build up layers. That ways I can always add more and not worry about having too much on the surface already and not to be able to add more layers. I think that works for me, but I also feel that I could be a little more bolder on adding pigments in the very first layer. I can go a lot more pigmented at the very first layers and save a few layers as I work on. But just, when you have worked in a similar manner for a long time, it sometimes becomes such a innate habit that you just keep on doing the same thing. And it eventually works out, so I have not had a reason to worry yet. But it's just a personal preference how you do things. You can always mix and match different techniques you learn from different people, different methods, and mix and match everything and see what works best for you. That's how I have built my own technique, build my own working style, and I insist that you also do the same. Learn from multiple sources and then mix and match all of those ideas together and pick out the ones that you like more than the others. After I've created some darker areas, I'm also creating some lighter striations with grays, lighter blues, and whites even. And some of them I'll blend it out to the background and not make it so starkly visible. And some of the striations I'll keep light and bright and prominent, because that's the look I'm going for. Some striations and some blended look, kind of like a mix and match of both of the looks. The water part, I think, was a predominant part in this painting. The rest of it flowed very easily onto the body of the mer creature, if you don't want to call it a mermaid. I think it's a mermaid, so we'll call it a mermaid from now on. Anyway, so I started off with the shadow areas, and I like to do my shadows initially with purple, and then I go back with the darker browns. And I like to use a variety of browns to create the look from dark to light. Some burnt umber, ochres, and whatever browns and yellows I have. And then I cover it all up with flesh tint, and then come back with more shadows, and then finally with the blending tool to blend it all out and see if I have enough pigments, if the darks and lights are in the right place, and if they are, I'll leave it at that. If not, then I'll add more layers and get everything to where I want it to be. The hands in this case were very slim, and the fingers were a little bit challenging. So what you can do in these smaller areas is that you can paint the entire area and kind of create a blob of the flesh, and then come in between with blues and make it prominent. You can also scratch out the fingers with a scratching tool. It can be an end of a palette knife, or it can be any kind of tools that you can scrape with. So that's an idea to get these finer detail areas. Over the years, I've kind of become adept at painting really thin fine lines, and especially with the Holbein oil pastels, because they have this square edges, it's easier to paint very fine details, very fine lines with them. That's an advantage with this particular oil pastel brand. Onto the hair, I'm first putting on my dark browns and indigo blues, and then I'm coming back in with some lighter blues. Typically I don't put so much of blues in the hair, but since this is an underwater scene, I wanted to tie it all together and keep the similar color palette even in the body of the mermaid. So I added a lot more blue than I typically would in the hair as well. Then once I blended it out with the edge of my blending tool and with indigo pastel, I created some flyaway hair that makes the hair look very natural and realistic. Also added a little bit of white here and there and blended that out, and that made some nice highlights in the hair that I was looking for. Painted a little bit of body, kind of like a shell body piece for the mermaid. Reminded me of the Disney character Ariel when I was doing this, and had to paint a little bit of adjust a little bit of the flesh tones in this case. Add a little bit of highlight here and there. And I actually went with a little bit more of my imagination rather than what the light source and color combination should be, and that made it look very bright and colorful, if nothing else. And that was a look I was going for in this painting. So I hope it catches your attention and matches to your liking as well. Next, onto the fins, I first put some darker colors on the edges and striations, and then came back and blended them with lighter colors. I used pink, purple, blue, white mainly for these fins, and on the body I have used more like greener tones along with some gold tones. Doing this other fin in the same exact way as I painted the first fin. I tried to paint a lot of fine details in this paint in this particular fin area and the entire painting, and I absolutely enjoyed this piece. You must be noting that I'm doing a lot of mer creatures, mermaid-like looking creatures, water, surrealistic creatures, and I'm kind of enjoying what I'm doing. So I think in future there is a lot of mermaid paintings coming up in different mediums in my channel. So if you like mermaids, I guess you would enjoy the future paintings as well. So on to the body of the fish body rather. I use blues and lime greens and some grays, and kind of wanted to give it like a look from that faded from silvery gray to a little bit golden, and then to lime green, and then finally to darker blues. And for the scales, I just used my lime green and just created some striations and went back in between the lime green with darker blues to enhance those marks of scales and have a more continuous realistic look. Once again, there's a lot of fine details to paint in this area, and totally enjoyed that. And that's more or less all about this painting, other than the tail fin. And I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, do not forget to give me a thumbs up. If nothing else, it motivates me to create more and more tutorials and paintings, and doing what I love to do, share things with you. And do share this video with whoever and whatever social media you prefer to, because sharing is caring. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're notified each time every week I post a new video, which is typically on Wednesdays and Fridays. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you back soon.